get started with any of the account reviews and things like that, I do want to hit up a few of the questions that we've got that I think are really pertinent and could be really good for us. So the first one today and where we want to start, are there any strategies that we should use if a lot of our competition is an actual PriceLabs customer? So let's say your competitors are also using PriceLabs. There's a little bit of a concern that, hey, if we all use PriceLabs, aren't we all going to end up with the same price? Aren't we all going to end up, you know, basically having the exact same deals? The answer to that is no. And the reason that you will always be able to differentiate yourself between yourself and your competitors is because of that base price and then the internal occupancy moves and things like that that we have. Um, those will always kind of keep you differentiated. Your property is going to book out very differently than your neighbor's property, even if your pricing's the exact same, even if the minimum length of stay is the exact same. Not everything's going to be apples to apples. The Airbnb algorithm is going to promote them higher than you, if they've been converting better, or if you've been converting better, you would be promoted. So you don't need to concern yourself if a bunch of people are using dynamic pricing in your area. What you want to make sure is what we've talked about in the past few days, that you're really staying on top of adjusting that base price if it's required. You don't want to go in there and just move it, but if you get a nudge that says, hey, let's move this, let's stick with that and kind of go with it. The next question that we have is, how can I implement price adjustments for midweek bookings and longer stays to maximize revenue? So with that, I'm going to share just a little bit. Get here. I'll hide the Q&A box. Now we can see that we're sharing. One thing I do want to point out, remember yesterday, this one right here, my Mountain Thunder Lodge, the one in Breckenridge, I accepted a base price recommendation. I went from $650 as my base price to the $605 that PriceLabs is suggesting. Now, I don't want to act like I'm tricking you all or anything. I put in fake reservations. They're not authentic reservations, but I wanted you to see what the expectation would be when you go in and change that base price. So what you should see is you should see these numbers start to grow a little bit. So right now you can see I'm still showing this. I haven't reviewed and saved. So let me save and refresh. So now in here, I had no bookings whatsoever. Now you can see I've started to pick up a few. Once again, this is just me putting these reservations in. It's not actually bookings that came in. Just wanted to show you what the expectation should be. So you can see my market penetration index has grown substantially. That is the expected behavior. Once you make that base price change, you should start to see some bookings come in. Maybe not multiple the way that I have these coming in, but you should start to see them coming in. So talking about being able to maximize or implement any type of pricing adjustments. Keep in mind, this is going to be our masterclass is focused on keeping it basic, but I do want to show you a couple of the customizations that we have that can help you. If you're connected directly to Airbnb or directly to Vrbo, my personal opinion is go ahead and set your monthly or your weekly discounts on the OTA, so on that online travel agency. It's going to help you out a little bit with their algorithm and things like that. But let's say that you don't want to have it set there, you do have length of stay, which is right here, if it's available for you. Don't want to dive in too much to this. If you have any interest in length of stay pricing and it's available to you by your PMS, take a look at our 201 customizations webinars, or go over to our YouTube and just type in PriceLabs length of stay pricing. You'll be able to get a video that'll help you out very well there. My apologies for kind of misdirecting you all on that one. The next question we have, what's the most effective way to handle orphan gaps and encourage multi-night bookings? Kind of what we were talking about yesterday with that minimum stay. That's going to be the best way for you to manage those orphan gaps, um, and make sure that you're filling in as much of the calendar as you can. So when we go to our stay restrictions, that's this area, the minimum stay settings, and being able to go in here and say, let's look at the suggestions. We did this yesterday, so I will go ahead and apply this. And with those suggestions, you're going to get something to kind of populate for your orphan gaps. That's a part of this. That is this orphan gap rule. So with this orphan gap rule, we are saying on weekdays, whatever the gap is, on weekends, whatever the gap is, between 1 and 5 nights, go to that gap. That's going to be the best way to kind of manage those occupancy gaps, or I'm sorry, those orphan gaps, and really maximize your occupancy and maximize the calendar as well. Right. So with that, we are pretty much done with the questions that we had canned ready to come in. I'm going to hit up our Q&A right now, see if we have any questions outside of, just the reviews and things like that we've got. Da, da. All right, here's one. Michael says, "Hi, my name's Michael, and I have one single listing in a small country in Europe called Andorra, which is the most luxury listing in the area out of roughly 400 properties. I'm surprised that I don't get more bookings as I follow my competition, which are doing better than me. Any ideas, Michael?" The first thing I'm going to say is take a look at your base price. I understand that your property is one of the most luxury. Um, you may not necessarily want to set your base price as the highest base price though, because if it's a luxury property, that demand factor is going to be really, really important. So if your base price is set really, really, really high to try to accommodate for that being a luxury unit, the demand factor could push it a little bit too much. So in that scenario, without me really looking at it, Michael, my suggestion would be for you to look at potentially bringing your base price back just a little bit. All right, I'm gonna hit a few more questions as we go down through here. Da, da, da. All right. Can PriceLabs offer hosts a toggle button for pricing recommendation when splitting the host fees with guests, as well if the host covers the fee themselves? I am clueless in the best way to price my property between the two. I don't know if just adding a 15% premium on my price will do the trick. As of right now, there is not necessarily a way to toggle between those two. Um, but I will say that we are constantly trying to make the product better, look at ways to include fees. It's become a very, I don't want to say a hot topic, but fees have come up a lot when it comes to talking about pricing and Airbnb. So we are on the backside, obviously just trying to constantly match whatever it is that's in the market. So don't be surprised if you start to see a little bit more fee implemented or implementation in Price Labs and a little bit more data, kind of like what we had on the neighborhood data tab. All right. Kyle, hello, Kyle. Kyle says, "Hey, Kyle, I'm setting up a combined parent-child listing. I want to make sure that if the entire property gets booked, the nightly rate isn't lower than the sum of the sub-listing child listing. Do I add the base prices together to achieve this?" Kyle, that's a really, really great question. When talking about trying to get them exactly matched, so to speak, the best thing you can do is, so let me relook at this. So if we're trying to do the parent-child, the best thing that you can do is have it, I'm trying to think of how to keep this as basic as possible for you. You're going to want to set the more expensive one as the parent. So if you have like a 2 bedroom that gets broken down into two individual room listings, so you've got a 2 bedroom listing and then a 1 bedroom listing and a 1 bedroom listing, you would want that 2 bedroom to be what your base price is. And then what we would probably want you to do, one, I would say reach out to support@pricelabs.co so you get the correct information sent to you based off somebody being able to look at your account, but you'll probably want to use our customization that's pricing offset. If you have any questions about that, reach out to support. You can also hit up our help center down here on the right and look up anything about that. So, uh, Karen says, "I'm not clear how Orphan Gap works. How many nights can they book?" This is a really good one. I'm going to go back and look at what we were looking at with the minimum stays and kind of how to read that Orphan Gap. And Darren also says orphan gaps are still very confusing. Can you go over it? So yes, we're going to go back over orphan gaps. So in this, when you set up your minimum length of stay, this area right here, this drop down is going to be the rule that you're selecting. By saying length of gap and just leaving it as it naturally is, it's going to go to whatever your gap is here. So let's say you have a property that is booked Sunday, Monday, and then it's open Tuesday, Wednesday, and then it's booked again Thursday, Friday. If you have this rule that we're looking at on the screen right now, those 2 nights that are open, because you say go to the length of gap, it's going to go to 2 nights. If that 2 night gap were a 3 night gap instead, it would go to 3 nights, so on and so forth. Any gap that you have between 1 and 5 nights. For an orphan gap, to be an orphan gap, you have to have that booking on the front end of it and the back end of it. So if you have a booking that comes in Monday, Tuesday, and then you don't have a booking until the next Monday or Tuesday, that orphan gap rule is not going to apply because there's no gap in there really for it. I guess technically with this one, it could have been the 5 nights, but in that theory, let's just say this one, it would not count towards the orphan gap. You have to have kind of those bookends around it. Hope that helps. Um, okay. Is there a place where PriceLab shows my specific property's occupancy rate, ADR, etc., for my specific time frame? Christopher, that's a good question. We are able to see all of that information. If you come up here, portfolio analytics is kind of its own tool, so to speak, but it is included with dynamic pricing. There's no additional cost for this or anything. I would suggest coming up here, go to your portfolio analytics and hit this KPI and historic reports ones. This is going to be really good information for you to just view. You can, if you need to, you can filter it down if you want to look at certain properties, but I'm just going to hit show analytics right here. And let this load for just a moment. Let's kill that off real quick. So in here, these are going to be your key performance indicators. And I would only use this top box right here if you're pretty novice with PriceLabs. If you've been using this for a year or two, maybe the graphs below it'll make more sense, but I'm not even going to show them because I don't want to overwhelm you guys. Just look here and you can compare and move things around if you want to. So let's say I wanted to see how I performed last month. I can just come down here, select last month, and I can see, okay, I was up $2,000. My occupancy was a little down. ADR looks good. Um, let's say I want to look, more forward looking. You can do a custom and look forward. You can also look at any of these other metrics. And the way this comparison is working is going to be, this is going to be your date range that you want to look at this year. This is going to be where you compare it to. So right now I'm saying I want my whole 2024 versus the exact same period of last year. So we can see I'm January 1st, 2024, December 31st versus January 1st through December 31st of 2023. So this one I know is apples to apples. What did I have at this point in time last year versus what I had this time? Then you have option also, if you wanted to change it between stay dates and create dates, I would just look at stay dates. That's the actual day that they are staying there. So that one should help you out. Let's get some questions again. Where'd my question bar go? 1 second, I'm gonna stop sharing and I will be right back to the share. I'm gonna pick up one more question and then I'll go to kind of looking over some of these properties. Mm -hmm. David asked, do you have plans to incorporate cleaning fees into pricing? I don't know how much of a difference they make for booking, but they certainly make a difference in my bottom line. Cleaning is like 150, regardless of how many guests or nights, so it's a huge impact on shorter stays, but it's not factored in the recommended price. Yes, we are currently looking at developing ways of including the fees into your base price calculation as well as into everything else. Fees are a huge, huge part of what we do when it comes to revenue management, making sure all the costs are covered and everything. That is something that is very heavily in development right now with us.